Remi Tinubu, their first lady, don't talk say make una reduce the expectation on her husband. She say she dey beg Nigerians, say the husband no fit carry una wahala. Say una wahala pass your husband. Say I beg, make una reduce una expectation from her husband. Make una leave your husband alone. Na yeah. After that one don bolofua, because dey hear say Emefiele dey dodge camera when he reach court. He no one make photographer catch am. What did they happen? Everybody. In fact, the whole fire for this government of it, they don't pass us on. They say it's not saying they hide from camera, they chook your head on that decks, make camera not catch your head for inside court. Though. After that, I don't see Bolofua, the ex-UK lawmaker George Galloway can come and say, he say he go help Nigerians say advertise all eyes on the judiciary. He say he go leak Tinubu in Ashkoma. He say he don't find the year, but he no say the matter serious like this. He say if he give a food chest to Nigeria, he say all the obedient. He say oh yeah, gonna carry going release una. Say he go help una fight una evidence. Hey, my people, this one not serious. So una former president, good Jonathan wife, the visit when go pay Remi Tinubu, he go mock am. He go tell her say it is easy. I dey here, you and your husband they fire me. Or APC now so me my husband comot. See Anna, hey, he do I know for you could read her body language, say come mocha. So all this video now they see for screen, so I will play everything. Now see this one for inside for diaspora team. They say this democracy in Africa. They say in fact that eye is on the judiciary. Say they mean am. Say this one not be say na go come. Say the diaspora team, say they will frustrate judiciary. Say if they not give the verdict, in fact, even as me and you they talk so, judiciary body they on fire. They don't know what I mean. They collect money when they give them or make they face this diaspora team and Nigerians. They say they don't even know that they are really confused now. Okay, that one bolo. So the way part Utomi talking very important. That's why I put this video for the last. Mona try, Mona watch them. The man and some Catholic in politics community come together, give very strong warning to the judiciary. This is not a joke. This is more than you and me. This is more than any other person. When I watched the video, because the man really said something, I was able to edit it to the part where he said they relevant. When I listen, my people. So coming to the trending news, so she showed a lot of discrimination about the ministerial stuff when they say they bring comment. So the role where they expected, they mean they give some people, they don't give some people. They don't even say they're supposed to give some people, they go give some people. Okay, my people. Tinubu is confused because looking at the ministers when you bring command, the role where you give them, you'll be like say just put them there because you know say no go stay long in Jesus' name. Amen. My people. It's gonna be Bod TV, but we would analyze all the trends. We'll put them together in one video. Wanna not forget to subscribe, like, and share this video. Wanna do yo.
And today's World Press Conference, we'll be looking at two important issues. Why did we invite you here? First, we know that recently we had elections in Nigeria. The election has come and gone, but we are not over yet with the outcome. Secondly, recently we had an incident in Niger Republic, and it is a current affair. And as members of the African community living abroad, with presence across the African continent, we want to lend our voice to these issues. But before we go on, first on the agenda, as I mentioned, is about the elections and the ongoing election petition at the election petition tribunal. It is important that I mention to you first that this press conference is to give voice to the letter that have already been sent to the election petition tribunal. And I want to also mention that apart from the election petition tribunal, there were organizations and institutions that were also copied. That includes the Chief Justice of Nigeria, the President of the Court of Appeal, the National Judicial Council. So before holding this press conference today, this has been sent to them and this was properly acknowledged. And they haven't acknowledged the receipt of this letter, which you can see here. You can see them all stamped here. This is their stamp. This is an acknowledgement copy. We are now here to emphasize what we have sent here so that the broader community, African community, will hear us. But before we go ahead, let me reintroduce. Diaspora Action for Democracy in Africa is a Pan-African organization established as a vehicle to mobilize African diaspora across the world, outside the African continent, to organize and deploy people of African descent, their competencies, resources, and social capital to redeem the African homeland from its state of underdevelopment. Let me also say, why are we holding this conference here today? Knowing that this is an African-wide organization, you must know, or we must reemphasize, that as is known all over the world, 1 in every 4 Africans is a Nigerian. And I can tell you that across Africa, everybody is looking up to Nigeria, even the world in general. Whatever happens in Nigeria have domino effect across Africa. Therefore, diaspora Africans decided that this should start in Nigeria and then get across to other parts of Africa. Like you can see today what is also happening in Niger. Apart from the fact that the current president of Nigeria is the chair of ECOWAS, Nigeria is being looked up to amongst other ECOWAS countries to actually lead the action in Niger. Hence, the diaspora community believes that whatever that is done in Nigeria will have domino effect across Africa. That is why Nigeria is the official signal for this organization. And as I mentioned, 2 important things we are dealing with here today is Nigerian government and the judiciary, and we are here to ask them to respect the wishes of Nigeria, even as we look forward to the judgment that is going to come from the election petition tribunals across Nigeria. Now, let me go further without wasting your time to mention that the 2023 Nigerian presidential election has moved from the ballot to the courtroom. The results from Nigeria's general election were under scrutiny in May 2023 as court considered several of the petitions we have in these petition tribunals from the state to the federal. It is important to emphasize that even in the Electoral Act, the election is inconclusive without this process that is ongoing right now. We all know that the election petition tribunals are part and parcel of the elections. If the Constitution were to be rejected, we are not supposed to have governors, members of the National Assembly, or anybody install the president until this process is exhausted. But coincidentally, where we are now in our trajectory, political trajectory, this process is included, yet somebody has to be installed so there won't be no vacuum. Hence, we have some people at the National Assembly whose cases are the tribunal, people who are sitting as governors whose cases are the tribunal, and somebody overseeing Nigeria as a president who is still at the presidential election tribunal. That notwithstanding, it is important now to know that the Presidential Election Tribunal particularly, whose outcome will have stronger effects on Nigeria's democracy and governance, has become a subject of attention. And recently, as we can see, there are ongoing campaigns, all eyes on the judiciary, of which, as of day before yesterday, we have seen an attempt to muzzle out that voice. But we must say that we find it challenging that in a democracy which emphasizes free speech, that citizens saying that all eyes on the judiciary should be a subject which will be, alluded to be a suggestive idea for anarchy. It is surprising that those who believe in the tenets of democracy are actually opposed to freedom of speech to the extent that the citizens say that all eyes are on the judiciary has become a subject for which some people have been termed anarchists. But that is unfortunate. But we're here today to say that we believe strongly that the judges know that in the history of Nigeria, no other election tribunal has raised the consciousness of Nigerians more than the 2023 presidential election, which they are currently presiding over. We have seen tribunals, we have seen election adjudicatory processes in the times past. But I will tell you that no other time in Nigerian history has it been this consensus. Now, many Nigerians, both home and abroad, and even beyond Nigeria, in fact, if you watch some foreign media, till tomorrow, they are subject of social discourse. As of Sunday, we had a very prominent former British member of parliament, George Galloway, having a world media platform where Nigeria's democracy and the ongoing tribunal was discussed. That's to tell you that, unlike before, Nigeria has become a subject of international attention strongly. Hence, the judges at the presidential tribunal knows that, like no other time in Nigerian history, it has become a subject of interest, and this is one of the things we want to emphasize. Arising from the discussions we have had with so many Nigerians and also other Africans, because as a diaspora organization covering the entire Africa, and Nigeria being a country whose activities have dominant effect across Africa, whatever happens in Nigeria has become a subject of great interest to us. So having discussed with Nigerians, having had these various interactions, because if their verdict fails to satisfy the requirements of justice, it may detonate the youth in Nigeria. We have to emphasize that. And this is why we are paying attention, and we are also using this opportunity before anything goes wrong to call the attention of everybody to that. Hence, we agree with one of the authors in this ongoing subject, Reverend Father John Ode, who wrote, and I quote, "The lessons we can learn from the NSAS protests and the 2023 election is this: when the people are pained and pinned against the wall of despair, when they are unjustifiably compelled to be poor, miserable, and hopeless, when they are systematically denied of their sources of decent living, when they can no longer trust their leaders, when they have justifiable reasons to be angry, when they cannot trust the police as the guardians of the law and order, when the law that should be their last hope turns around to become their worst enemy, with the result that they cannot trust the justice system. And finally, when the nation itself ignores justifiable rage of the neglected younger generation, as it happened during the NSAS protests of October 2020 and during the electoral savagery of 2023 elections, there is the threat of some violent implosion or explosion unless the situation is redressed. Therefore, we need to emphasize that Nigerians have been patient because they believe in the rule of law and because they understand that even the election petition tribunals are part of the electoral process. And in exhausting these processes, they want to see justice. Nigerians cannot continue to be taken for granted. Like I have emphasized, that for the simple reason of raising a banner, calling on the attention of the judiciary to say that all eyes are on you, some people are already threatening anarchy. You can't guard the people in a democracy and claim to be a democracy. And we want to emphasize that today. The judiciary is the only institution that has all it takes to save this country from the threat of implosion. All eyes have been on the judiciary because of Nigeria's respect for the rule of law. It does not mean that the members of the Presidential Election Tribunal are in a better position in this case to tell Nigerians the person who won the presidential election. Nigerians do not wait for the court to tell them the winner of any election. It is the electorate that should tell the court because they know more than the court. Nigerians voted. In fact, let me emphasize here that without prejudice to any party, whether in power or out of power, that every political party had what they call situation room. In their situation rooms, they had election collection centers from different wards to local governments, to state, and to the federal. And I don't think those challenging the outcome of the election are ignorant of what they are saying. And if you have listened to various political parties, they will tell you that the result they have on hand differs from what INEC have announced, despite the fact that INEC have insisted that they have done their job well. Hence, according to the electoral law, it now falls on the judiciary. But we want the judiciary to know that it is not as if Nigerians did not know who they voted for. It's not as if Nigerians did not witness some of their comrades being denied the opportunity to vote in certain parts of Nigeria. It's not as if Nigerians are not aware that over 80 people were killed, maimed during the last election. It is not as if Nigerians do not know that some people were stabbed. Of election in certain places were not as even announced in the polling unit. Hence, what Nigerians simply expect the judiciary to do is to take all this to cognizance in what? In delivering justice. We deplore the threat by a candidate in the election against the judiciary that if he is removed for not measuring up to the demands of the electoral law of the land, there will be chaos and anarchy. Nobody is bigger than this country. Nigeria belongs to all Nigerians. The use of threats, the use of subtle threats is anti-democratic. And we want to emphasize it here that the diaspora community, African diaspora community, will not tolerate that. And let me say this, for those who may think that, what is this African diaspora community all about? Why are they involved? Why are they interested? If you listen to the Central Bank Governor of Nigeria as of day before yesterday or 2 days ago, you will hear him make reference to diaspora remittances as part of their strategic plan in mitigating the floundering exchange rate of the naira. A community of Nigerians that remit over $22 billion into this economy, where the national annual export value is $18 billion, has greater impact on this country, more than many people can. They are Nigerians who have lived here, who have relations here, who have come here every day, who have investments here. They are Africans who want their home countries to grow. Hence, they are critical stakeholders and must be respected. And they are here to say that no one Nigerian is bigger than all of Nigerians. The subtle threat that if one person is removed and the rule of law is observed will bring anarchy is unheard of and cannot be tolerated, irrespective of who that person is. Some people have ruled this country before and they are no more here. Some have ruled the country at the level of states, they are no more their state governors. Some are in government today, they will not be here tomorrow. But one thing that is consistent is that this country will remain, and no one person's interest or position or ambition should be more than and greater than this, the interest of this country. And let me say that, having said that the removal may instigate anarchy, we must also say that those who are calling for anarchy should be careful, because we know that no person has the monopoly of violence. As much as we recognize that today, on various social media platforms and media, we have seen some of the unwitting talks, please emphasize, unwitting talks, who have been supporting some of these candidates, given opportunity to appear in the villa and given opportunity to speak on issues concerning Nigeria. Some of these people, non-state actors, have threatened other Nigerians on behalf of some of these candidates. And we are in a democracy. And I guess these are some of the things that are given impetus to the statement that if some people are removed, there will be anarchy in the land. But we want to remind them, as I said earlier, that Nigeria is bigger than anybody, and no Nigerian is greater than anybody. Diaspora Action for Democracy in Africa wants the world to know that that will not be tolerated. In a nutshell, no matter how or whatever the opinions might be, we encourage the judiciary to do the right thing. The judicial process is part of the electoral process, irrespective of the fact that we have some people that have already been inaugurated as governors, senators, president. It does not remove from the fact that the judicial process is part of the process, and some people think it's a fait accompli because they have been inaugurated. Diaspora Action for Democracy in Africa is saying that is not the truth. We must see that the right thing is done. Secondly, we did mention the ongoing issue in Niger. Niger is a hot button issue for ECOWAS, and now we have various interests, both local and international, trying to intervene. And as Africans living across the world, outside the continent, Diaspora Action for Democracy in Africa, they are interested in what is happening in Niger. Because today, The crisis that started in Libya have ravaged the entire Sahel and may actually have been intrinsically involved in the crisis in Niger today. And as Africans who are making their contributions to the development of their countries and Africa, we have a say here. And this is why we're saying that the regional leaders indeed have had their emergency meetings, and President Tinubu, being the chair of ECOWAS, have also made the world to know what is on the table, including the use of military force, and has actually spoken about a standby force by ECOWAS as one of the options on the table. We all cherish democracy. Diaspora Action for Democracy in Africa believes in democracy, actually wants democracy. But when we have interactable issues like this on our continent, the ways and measures we take to deal with them, to ameliorate the situation, is critical. We already have many conflicts in different parts of Africa. That is what stunting development, undermining growth, and also bringing economic hardship from Libya to Sudan to Mali to Burkina Faso to Niger, even to Nigeria. And if you look at the trajectory, before the year 2003, 2004, there were less than 15% incidents of terrorist attack in Africa. But in fact, since after the fall of Libya and the ongoing crisis in Libya, you have had more than 2,000 terrorist attacks on the continent of Africa. What are the issues that are prelude to this matter? Some of them were as a result of the political crisis in some of the African countries that were not managed well. When we had issue in Libya, and the issue in question was about how to institutionalize democracy, rather than go through the diplomatic means, Africans allowed foreign interests. They allowed external influence to engage in Africa, to the extent that 6 presidents representing the AU who are sent on a mission to go and find peace in Africa were stopped by foreign interests from going into that mission, threatening to shoot down their aircraft. And that is very absurd in the 21st century. Diaspora Action for Democracy in Africa, coming from this background and of knowledge, hence wants to emphasize there is need to please emphasize and maintain the use of diplomacy in trying to settle the issues in Niger. There are a lot of intricate issues involved. Even right here in Nigeria where we're seated, Nigeria shares over 900 miles border with Niger, with so many of those who constitute a large population of Nigerian population having relations in Nigeria. A crisis in Niger will affect Nigeria. A crisis in Nigeria will affect West Africa. A crisis in West Africa will affect Africa. As much as Diaspora Action for Democracy in Africa wishes for the restoration of democracy in Niger, we want to emphasize that it is a very high-risk issue. In the words of Paul Ejime, an ECOWAS and AU conflict resolution consultant, he said, and I quote, "Apart from the possibility of a military confrontation escalating into a catastrophic war and the consequences of military intervention in the complex environment can be better imagined than experienced. When it happened in Libya, a country that had been a prosperous nation for over 30 years. At that time, emotions were high, reason were low. And eventually, the intervention have brought that country to its knees today and is affecting the whole of Africa. Today, we can see the proliferation of light arms and weapons across the Sahel, even affecting the biggest economy in Africa, being Nigeria. Therefore, regardless of the position taken by various parties that have direct and tangential interests in Niger, primacy must be given to dialogue and diplomacy towards a resolution with minimal disruptive impact on Nigeria and the West African region. Whereas ECOWAS authorities have indicated that they remain open to various conflict resolution options, diplomacy should remain the overreaching imperative in resolving the potential crisis. The people of Niger must be allowed, via their national institutions, the opportunity to revert quickly to a representative democracy, while ECOWAS must seek to discourage the spread of military dictatorship in West Africa. The recourse to armed deterrence must be restrained by multilateral diplomatic mechanisms. Please, we want to re-emphasize. Diaspora Action for Democracy in Africa want to re-emphasize. Africa belongs to Africans. Africa belongs to Africans. As of this minute and as of this moment, despite the military interregnum, no blood has literally been shed in Niger. And any activity, any event, any involvement, any kind of engagement that will lead to the shed of blood in Niger, in West Africa, must be discouraged. We must recognize the relationship Africa has with the global world. The multilateral organizations, including the United Nations and other partner organizations like EU and the rest of them. Why that is the case? What has happened in Niger is an African affair, and Africa, throughout its history, have had a process for resolving conflict, including the use of arbitration processes. Diaspora Action for Democracy in Africa is seizing this opportunity to emphasize what many experts, diplomats, and opinion mothers have said. Let's avoid what has happened in Libya that have turned the Sahel into the hotbed of terrorism in the world. Please, let's avoid any reason for which there will be arms and military intervention in Niger. Whatever diplomatic structure and strategy that have to be used must be used. Again, in conclusion, this press conference, as I told you, especially regarding the Presidential Election Position Tribunal, before this press conference, we had already sent a letter to the tribunal, and this letter where we copied some institutions and representatives of some national institutions that have anything to do with it, including the CJN, NJC, and others alike. So we're not just having a press conference, we're actually highlighting what is already known around the institutions of judicial demands of diaspora action for democracy in Africa. And I must say, if you must know, taking example of Nigeria, a group of people that remits over $20 billion into the economy of a nation have a great say, and whatever they say must be respected And that is why we are here today. Thank you for listening. God bless you. The first question was as to why the organization Diaspora Action for Democracy in Africa is coming up now with a press conference. We believe in democracy, we believe in judiciary, we believe in all the institutions of democracy. What we're simply doing is to give a voice to what is already happening. It is a reminder about the issues at stake. And there is no better time other than now. And we have also seen, especially in Nigeria, where even judgments were given, despite what everybody knows is the literal rule of law. I mean, not even amongst the cases that are yet to be decided, those that have been decided even within this period of election cycle, we had a case where some people who ran for presidential election, irrespective of the Electoral Act 2022 as amended, which does not permit people to run for 2 positions in one election cycle. You have had in this Nigeria where such people who ran, whose posters were everywhere, who ran not just for presidential election, stepped down from running for presidential primaries, went to be conferred with a ticket for a senatorial contest, where they were never known to be in that primaries. These are some of the aberrations we see.
I have come here to encourage you, to support you, because we are one country, and our country must move forward, and for the country to be better, because it's our country. We have no other country than Nigeria. We have no other place to go. We must support you. We must support you to make sure you achieve what you are here for. And when you achieve, we have achieved. So the Nigeria must move forward. And I use this opportunity also to plead to the women of this country, because I know that my sister can carry the women along. She carried the women along when she was a governor's wife. So when she's a first lady, the sky will be her limits. She will carry us along and she will move us forward. We Nigerian women, we should come out in mass and support this government and support her. The sky will be our limits.
We miss this woman, Mama P. Mama P. She's back. Mama P is back. Dr. Abati's former principal. I mean, you know, she dropped a lot of favorable sound bites when she was First Lady of Nigeria. But I mean, I think that she's quite apt about women empowerment and support for women. Yes, and I think that, you know, she also stated that she's not surprised that Remi Tinubu is in that position. Because, you know, even before she became First Lady of Nigeria, they were both governors' wives, and she was her, you know, her senior. To mention the 7 female ministers, if we can pull up that GFX, we had the Minister of Art and Culture, Creative Economy, Hannatu Musawa. A lot of people have said, okay, does she really fit that portfolio? But I think she does. I mean, she is a creative in her own right. And, you know, people talked about the fact that she, you know, it could have been somebody more in, you know, the Nollywood industry. But we also had a Minister of Tourism. We have Minister Lola. You mentioned that. You said that she could have had a stronger portfolio.
Excellent CV, excellent track record. Minister of Tourism, not this particular administration's focus, because we have an issue with insecurity. I don't know who you're going to be attracting to come and visit us when we haven't sorted out, you know, security. And so I thought her expertise and technical skills could have been better used, better placed. People have said it's an opportunity for her to really build that ministry. I hope she would. I believe she would. You know, she has, I do believe that she can handle almost any ministry, but I thought that perhaps she should have gotten something better suited to her expertise.
Yeah, there might be some innovation there too. But there's also a Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment, Doris Anete. There's also a Minister of State, Labor and Employment in Kiruka, Onye Cha. I mean, that was Festus Keyam's position, right?
Yes,
Wasn't it?
yes, it was.
Remember that we talked Minister of State.
She's Minister of State. Labor and
Yeah, that is Festus Keyam's position. And remember that Festus Keyamo had talked about, you know, scrapping out that
Minister of State. There were a number of them.
Yes, and we see it here. It didn't happen. We also see Minister of Women Affairs, Uju Kennedy, the dancing minister.
Yeah. The only female presidential candidate from the APC.
From the APC. Minister. Then there's also Minister of Humanitarian Affairs and Poverty Alleviation. We thought Betta Edu would have been Minister of Health.
Well, Minister of State for Health, because Professor Ali Pate is there. So we had looked at the fact that maybe, but to be fair, I do think, because she's the immediate past national women's leader of the APC. She was a former commissioner for health in Cross River State. And so in terms of being able to manage that, I think it's quite a sensitive ministry, especially with regards to removal of fuel subsidy, palliatives, conditional cash transfers, and hopefully she'll do a better job than we had in previous.
And I believe, last but not the least, Minister of State, Federal Capital Territory, Mariga Mahmood.
So FCT now has a governor and deputy governor.
We have a governor and deputy governor. FCT is such a large state now. I mean, I hope, there's also that conversation which leads me to my next story about Governor Wike. There are some controversial ministers. Meanwhile, the cabinet portfolio released by the special advisor to the President on Media and Publicity, Ajuri Ngelale, on Wednesday has generated major reactions on social media. Top on the list is the appointment of former Governor of Rivers State, Nyesom Wike, as Minister of the Federal Capital Territory. Wike is the second Southerner to head the FCT after Ajose Ajogun, who was appointed in 1976. Another controversial appointment was that of former Minister of State for Labor and Employment, Festus Keyamo, who was appointed Minister of Aviation and Aerospace Development. And finally, a surprise to many, Dele Alake, who was former spokesman to the President, now appointed as Minister of Solid Minerals Development. Well, let's take some reactions on X. This is from Daniel Rega. He says, Tinubu is appointing Festus Keyamo as Aviation Minister. With what qualification or experience, please? Many of the nominees aren't qualified for their positions, but that of Festus and Wike as FCT minister are laughable. Nepotism seems to be the new politics in Nigeria. What a shame. Another Twitter user there, New Nigeria, wrote, Dele Alake, Tinubu's right-hand man, going to the Ministry of Solid Minerals is the most interesting thing about the full list. I bet my money that the game here is coal. I mean, New Nigeria, I don't know if it's just coal. There's a lot of minerals that are out. Dr. Abati, over to you.
Okay, very quickly. Let's start with the ladies. we said it was a good thing when initially President Tinubu announced, names of women ministers. And we thought you would be able to meet that target of 35% affirmative action. But what we have here is 19%, more or less, because the women were supposed to be about 8. Stella Okotete, our confirmation was without. We don't know whether she will scale through at the end of the day. But if you look at the distribution of the ministries, now, yes, some people have said Anna Tumusawa is not a good fit for creative economy, right? Art and culture and creative economy. But look, a ministry is as strong as the president decides to make it.
Absolutely.
She's a lawyer. If she has the support of the president, there's a lot that she can do. And many of these ministers will be able to perform if you give them KPI, key performance indicators. We should emphasize that. It's not just about title. It's about what the key performance indicators are. And there's a lot that can be done in art and culture and, creative economy in terms of providing a more enabling environment for Nollywood. Under President Jonathan, that was a special focus area, and the government concentrated on art and culture, and we were able to make a lot of progress there. Particularly at that time, Nollywood contributed so much to GDP. Now, secondly, Lola Adejon has been made Minister of Tourism. When we had Sam Amadi earlier on, he was saying he doesn't think tourism should be prioritized. but you have to start from somewhere.
Yeah.
There are tourism potentials in this country. It's just that they have not been properly harnessed. Yes, our background may be in technology, you know, and all of that, but well, you know, who says she cannot surprise us? Now, Better Edu, Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, the name of that ministry used to be Humanitarian Affairs and Social Development or something, you know, or whatever. But now they have specifically focused on poverty alleviation. That's a major responsibility. Oh, yeah. And she's a Malabress. Another, come to think of it, we are everywhere.
Doing well.
We are everywhere.
Doing well.
And then of course, you have Nkiru Jocha, made Minister of State. I thought, given her capacity, you know, and her exposure, experience as a lawmaker for so many years, that maybe she could be given something more substantial. But, you know, in that position, I believe she would do well. And then, of course, Women Affairs, who is in that, Uju Kennedy. Uju Kennedy, I believe she will do well there. But we would like to see more women, you know, female ministers. Yeah. Now, as for the others, Wike, Minister of the FCT. Well, it's a very strategic appointment, and I hope that, you know, people say, why are they giving him Minister of the FCT? No, that's totally beside the point. What that office requires is managerial capacity. Whatever you may say about Wike, he has been in this territory for a long time. I think he started as a local government chairman or as a local government councillor, became chief of staff, became commissioner, became minister, became governor, you know, and all of that. So he has substantial experience. Yeah. You may not like his style, but he has, you know, relevant experience. Festus Keyamo, aviation minister and aerospace development. That's another ministry, they changed the name. Okay, what is the complaint about? Festus Keyamo is a senior advocate of Nigeria, he's a lawyer. He's not the first lawyer that will be Minister of Aviation. Femi Fani-Kayode was there. Yeah. He was a lawyer, okay? And he too has had, you know, very good exposure in different capacities. The question is, what are the KPIs? Yeah. How will he perform? So I keep stressing this KPI because some people go, they make them ministers, they don't even know what the portfolio is all about. I've had a minister coming to me and say, hey, Abati, this ministry your God gave me, what is in this ministry? But after about 2-3 years, the same man was doing like this all over the corridor, you know, asserting himself. I said, look at this one. The day we announced the portfolio, you didn't even know what the portfolio they gave you was all about. So it's important to have the KPI. Yes, Mr. Dele Alake, I'm a bit surprised that it was solid minerals. You know, I thought, you know, it was going to be given information, communications, and strategy.
Everyone thought so, yeah.
It's a natural territory, but it may well surprise us. Right. But it is about what the president wants him to achieve there. Right. After all, we have had other people in solid minerals that were not necessarily in that line. Who was that now? Kade Fayemi, right? You know, was in that area. We have had other people there who went there and made efforts. And there's a lot to be done there if the proper indicators are followed. All right,
Rufai, there's another dimension. There's no doubt about Governor Wike being a performing governor.
No, I mean, so Wike actually makes the third southerner. You talked about Ajose Adeogun. There was another person, I think Chief Mark Okoye, in fact, which was one of the youngest minister of state during Shagari regime, and that makes it Governor Wike. I mean, you can't take it away from him. Like Dr. Abati said, you might not like his politics, but he's got, you know, a sense of, you know, managerial understanding as which he administers things. And I think it's going to bring that to bear. And also the other ministers that in their portfolio, they might not have expertise. It's also incumbent on them to learn. But there are some ministries that we can take chances with. Power, for instance. Yes. You must know what is really going on there. And, you know, even if you are A-grade brain and all of that, once you get in there, you see that the dynamics is quite different and you should be able to organize yourself. And that's why I'm a little not confident about, you know, that. Why I was probably talking about the possibility of an El-Rufai for that position, if he had taken it, was because he oversaw the privatization process. And he knows a little bit more about all of this going on as regards the power sector. So that's why I was tipping him, you know, for that position. But since he didn't get it, you know, life happens. Also, another ministry I would like to look at very strongly will be that of finance, coordinating minister of finance, and also, that of health. It is very sad in Nigeria that, Audrey, about 10% of our healthcare, it's only about 10% of our primary healthcare centers that are really in top shape. And Ali Pati is about one of the best brains in terms of public health in the world, not in Nigeria. Ali Pati is a world-class brain. He's just coming from Gavi. He's got a lot of experience. He's going to bring that to bear. And I think he himself has constantly talked about, improving primary healthcare delivery and other factors of healthcare in Nigeria, as his remit. So we see a lot that will be done as regards that. Mr. Wale has a job cut out for him. He's an investment banker. He should bring antecedent experience. Because then the KPI you were talking about, one will be about how we can even rejig the industry, fix the structural problems. I'm happy the government has started with this taxation thing, also providing power. And that's why I kept on going back to power. Power is very necessary, it's very important. Also cutting the red tape and the massive corruption and cronyism that pretty much happens in government. Because it's not as if these ministers don't know what is good for Nigeria. But you see, the reason why people constantly suffer on the African continent is because of the selfish interests of people in power. It's because of the fact that their friends too must eat. And there's no how you want your friends to eat and Nigeria will be good. It's not possible. Brendan Kennelly, a popular Irish poet, will always say, if you want to serve your age, you must learn to betray it. What it means is, if you want to serve Nigeria, you must learn to betray your friends. Because the interests of your friends might not be, consonant with Nigeria. And take, for instance, the gas sector. I hope we can open up the gas sector. I hope Heineken Locobri can do a lot of work, but I don't see, and it looks as though they've retained that slot of Minister of State for Petroleum for Bayelsa State. But we should be able to open up the sector. I was reading a Washington Post article in 1998. The article was just after Abacha had died. And they were talking about the cronyism, the fact that over $600 million was shelled out as a dent to be able to fix the refineries. It never worked. Why did the refineries not work then? Because those that were close to Abacha's kitchen cabinet were making so much money because of the importation of petrol products coming in, and they didn't make the refineries work. And Abacha didn't make it work. And it is still that problem that is evident today. So whatever we say about these ministers, please, let the interests of Nigeria be paramount to you more than the interests of your friends.
All right. To take our final story. Yesterday, we discussed Senate President Akpabio's contributions during the National Policy Dialogue on Corruption, Social Norms and Behavioral Change, where he stated that Nigerians need behavioral change to tackle corruption and bad social norms, while a new video showing a train track that's been vandalized by criminals is generating fresh debate on social media. Let's take a look.
And see how all the knots holding this rail line have been stolen. Just look at. This is the difference. This one is there. This has been stolen. See? This is there. This stolen. All this all the way down. Over 50 on this line are stolen. Federal government, you need to come and see this. Nigeria, may God help us. We are on problem.
This is horrible. Let me take some reactions. This is from Arewa, who wrote, the government has an equal part to play in what is happening. You can't impoverish the citizens and not expect high rate in crime, while politicians are using pens to steal billions. Poor, impoverished citizens are left with scampering for means of livelihood through petty stealing. I think this person was responding to Bashir Ahmed, who actually wrote, no soul can imagine the level of sabotages from in and out this country has gone through since 1960. We're indeed our own worst enemies. What wickedness. Well, we also showed a car driving on the expressway in Shagamu with only 3 tires yesterday. Well, here is a video showing a tricycle maneuvering its way through a road with potholes carrying empty crude barrels.
This is the level of madness that goes on. But I don't support that tweet because of impoverishment and all of that. I don't support that.
That's
act right, act right. It's not because people are impoverished.
Yes.
For a good part of my adult life, I've read the Book of Lamentations, not in the Bible, but by Nigerians. Nigerians are constantly lamenting why things are going bad, have gone from bad to worse and all of that. And I find a certain, I don't know what to call it, slothfulness that prevents us from asking, what is at the root of this? We just talk about the problems. There's also another perspective that values shape human progress. Yet if you look at Nigeria, you will see that culture is in collapse. Our values are going the wrong direction. Our institutions are being damaged every day by politicians. And we ask ourselves, why is Nigeria struggling? Why is there poverty ravaging the land? I had personal privilege to write a book titled Why Nations Are Poor. And I made this point back in 2006 about why there is poverty in this land. It's not an accidental thing. It's a function of a failure of our institutions and the collapse of culture. And Barack Obama's first visit to Africa as an American president made the point in that speech in Accra that what Africa needs, strong institutions, not strong men. But every day we see our institutions weakened. This conference statement is being issued jointly by the Catholics in Politics and its Business Leaders Forum, the Catholic Action Nigeria, and the Catholic Laity Council of Nigeria, in order to address pressing matters that have an impact on the well-being of all Nigerians. In many ways, we are at a crossroads in our lives as citizens and as a putative civilization. These times call for people of goodwill to exercise prophetic authority in civil society. It is to this duty that we gather with the spirit of the prophet Amos on social justice to address some grave present danger facing Nigeria and millions of people, God's children, whose destinies could be jeopardized without the assent of truth and justice in the situation we face in Nigeria today. Amongst the issues to be addressed are the legitimacy challenges from disputed elections, now before tribunals, the plight of the people ravaged by poverty and burdened by public policy choices that seem to crush their will, especially the vulnerable and the weak, who, by the way, have a very special place in God's heart. And then, of course, the distractions, both at home and abroad, that have drawn decision makers in Nigeria away from the central issue of care for Nigerians who are suffering as they engage in adventures around the world and within that are almost irrelevant to the quality of life, the dignity of the people of Nigeria. This is why our prayers today include a call for impartiality, justice, and accountability from the Honorable Justices of the Presidential Elections Petition Tribunal. I mean, we all know how a certain pervasive feeling that justice doesn't happen in Nigeria has led to many people feeling despondent, but we want today to challenge that disposition. As representatives of Catholics in politics, industrialists, and the entire laity of the Catholic Church, we are here to remind the Honorable Justices that all eyes are on the judiciary and that the nation eagerly awaits their judgment on the presidential elections petitions that are before them. We implore the honorable justices to consider their role as safeguarding our democracy and to ensure that the verdict is not tainted by any external influences or personal biases. We emphasize the need for justice to prevail without fear or favor, guided solely by the principles of fairness and truth. We unequivocally state that Nigerians expect justice to be served in a manner that reflects the will of the people, and that the honorable justices should acknowledge the weight of their responsibilities and understand that their decision will shape the course of our nation's future. We also firmly believe that there won't be anarchy and heaven will not fall when a just and transparent judgment is served. In fact, the contrary is the case. The thing that will push us into anarchy is for injustice to prevail. And we have the prophets Amos and the history of the Jewish people to remind us of that. And so we strongly condemn in any form threats against the honorable justices in an attempt to influence judgment. And we want to send a clear message to politicians that no amount of threats or intimidations will weaken or intimidation will weaken the determination of Nigerians across ethnic and religious backgrounds who are united in their pursuit of a new Nigeria. Because that's something that is a matter of desperation, a new Nigeria. We urge our politicians to respect the integrity and independence of the judiciary and allow justice to be served without intervention. And we urge the honorable justices to recognize the historical significance of their decision as a fair and just judgment will emancipate Nigeria from its present hardships and burden of bad fiscal and monetary policies. On the hardships and economic challenges currently faced by the common people of Nigeria, we urge politicians across party lines to put aside party differences, collaborate in the best interest of the Nigerian people, and take swift and decisive action to address the prevailing economic crisis. We strongly condemn the holiday prayers in monetary values sent by the Senate President to the inbox of federal legislators. In a country where millions of our fellow citizens struggle to provide basic necessities for their families, it is distressing to witness our representatives indulging in such extravagant practices. It is disheartening, therefore, to witness these same legislators who have supported and endorsed policies that have exacerbated the hardships faced by our citizens now engaging in ostentatious displays of sharing our commonwealth in the form of prayers to their bank accounts. This clearly shows the disconnect between our lawmakers and the realities on the ground. The Nigerian people are not interested in empty gestures. Nigerian people clearly are not interested in empty gestures. They yearn for tangible actions that will alleviate their suffering and bring about real change. We call on the Senate President and federal legislators to show accountability and to immediately redirect their focus on policies and actions that address the pressing needs of our citizens. On the military junta in the Niger Republic, we call on ECOWAS heads of states to lend an attentive ear to the multitudes of voices that have expressed opposition to military intervention. We urge ECOWAS heads of states to recognize the importance of engaging with stakeholders who advocate for peace, reconciliation, and respect for the will of the Nigerian people. We call upon ECOWAS heads of states to leverage the diplomatic avenues at their disposal and engage in dialogue, mediation, and negotiation to find a way forward that is acceptable and truly represents the wishes of Nigerian citizens. Now is the time for them to demonstrate their commitment to values of regional cooperation, inclusivity, and respect for sovereignty. Dear friends, I want to thank you so very much for your kind attention. I hope that we will be able to extend these thoughts to all Nigerians everywhere through you so that we may be engaged and rescue our country. The Caritas Nigeria, JDPC, were hugely invested, engaged in, as with other elections, election monitoring. They have published this huge report, the 2023 General Elections Observation Report in Nigeria. The European Union invested billions of naira in INEC, and they have published a report. I believe that Chatham House has its own report. If the waiting of the outcome of what the judges do contradict these reports, we have created a deep legitimacy crisis for any regime that comes out of it. And that is part of the point I was trying to make about understanding why countries don't make progress. May Nigeria continue to go forward, or it may continue to stumble and fumble, but you can tell where it is going. It's all the way south. It's going to be a failed state when the regime does not have legitimacy. I put on my political scientist hat now. One of the most remarkable books about the nature of democracy was written by an American political scientist called Seymour Martin Lipset. And the book is titled The First New Nation. And he probes deeply into the concept of legitimacy. Legitimacy is earned every day. We can institutionally say a regime derives legitimacy from the ballot box and the announcement of the outcome of the count of the vote. But if in its conduct, a day after the election, it is not seen to act in the interest of the people, it goes through a vitiation of its legitimacy attributes. In fact, and indeed, when your legitimacy becomes atrophied, you generally create a situation that leads to what political scientists refer to as the politics of power erosion. When a coup succeeds, it is because power erosion has traveled very far, because the regime they have replaced has significantly lost legitimacy. And this is what we will have to watch and deal with in Nigeria. It's not a matter of what we here think or even do. Somalia did not get to be Somalia by accident. It is because of the politics of power erosion following crisis of legitimacy. And then Somalia became a failed state in which warlords control several places. And what is going on in Nigeria here? We're encouraging thugs to have public authorities support because we think they are on our side of some political divide. That's how you create a delegitimization of the state. and ultimately create warlords and reach the road to Somalia. We need to be careful of these things. This is why I make the point that you need to understand how countries have made progress and why they have failed through human history. And many of the things we're doing right now, essentially encouraging arriving at the destination of those countries that have failed. And citizens must rally to say, it cannot go on like this. There are certain dignifying things to do. Thugs don't show up in the villa and give press conferences that divide their people. That is not done by any serious regime in the world. I think that is a matter in your domain as people who work in the marketplace of ideas. It's a public conversation subject. What is freedom of expression? What is abuse of the right of freedom of expression in a democracy? I incidentally had the privilege many years ago of being part of a U.S. International Visitors Program on the subject of freedom of expression. And amongst those who were on that team with me were Abike Dabiri and Senator Sani, Shehu Sani. It was several years ago before Shehu Sani became a senator. And the subject of freedom of expression is very, very fundamental to how democracies thrive. Surely your freedom stops where mine begins. But the nuances of what freedom of expression really is can make or break a democracy. And that is a clear example. I mean, I don't know who are the people putting up the signs, but they can argue their constitutional rights to express themselves one way or the other. Or should we arrest the person who said anarchy will follow a certain kind of decision? Should we knock down his statement? All those are issues on freedom of expression. And we ought to put all of these together in how we look at this collapse of culture that we talk about, and whether the prospects of democracy in Nigeria can be, if you will, considered safe and good. In the 1970s, I think around 77 or thereabouts, I was with a group of Ethiopian and Somali friends, and we went to a nightclub in London. We were, I think the day or so before that, suddenly Somalia became a US client and Ethiopia became an East Bloc client. It used to be the other way around. I think Mangitu Haile Mariam had taken over in Ethiopia, and he decided to turn to Eric Honecker and East Germans for support. And Ethiopia, which had been an American client state, suddenly was on the Marxist side, and Somalis had to then be adopted by the Americans as their new client. A number of tragedies in this story, besides the fact that one of the girls poured wine on me while they were pouring all kinds of things across the table at each other, the Ethiopians and the Somalis. But a really serious part of this is that Africa has gone full circle and we're back in the 1960s. We are back to being client states of countries. What came out of Africa's place during the so-called Cold War? Because Africa's decline, fall into poverty, and ultimately a concept emerged that was called Afro-pessimism. Afro-pessimism was an indication that Africa was a place of pessimism In fact, an OECD study suggested that Africa was so irrelevant to the world. And somebody asked the question at the presentation of that OECD study, so what happens? And the person was cynical enough to say, if Africa were to drop out of the planet, nobody will notice. And that was the period when Time magazine, some of these magazines had cover stories like the hopeless continent. Well, we seem to have recovered some from Afro-pessimism, but suddenly we seem to be winding ourselves back to client states and Afro-pessimism. And if the people who lead Africa are not intelligent enough to understand what is going on, and in their short-term hunger for personal legitimating attributes, they bring Africa back to where it was in the 1970s. The shame will be theirs forever. So we ought to understand history, understand where we are. It's much more than this was a big country and that is a small country. It's much more than that. In fact, there are friends of mine whose interpretation of what is going on is that the regimes of West Africa that are called democracies are illegitimate. They are far less democratic than one taken over by the military, because they have abused democracy by forcing people to pretend that they are a democracy, installing regimes that the people do not believe in, and calling those democracies. They are not democracies. I have held the view very strongly that Nigeria is not a democracy. And so if a group of soldiers overthrow a quasi-democracy, they might be doing a greater good to their people than what is happening in Nigeria. That's a personal view of mine. I expressed it strongly. And so this, funny, look, Alhassan Ouattara, president of Côte d'Ivoire, and myself, and Tidjane Thiam, who became minister of planning back in those days in Côte d'Ivoire, and Ablaise Ouedraogo, who was then deputy managing director of the WTO. 4 of us were walking down the lake in Annecy in France in 1996. Alhassan Ouattara was then deputy managing director of the IMF, when he said, suddenly during the course of our walk, that he was going to go back and run for president of Côte d'Ivoire. I immediately, all kinds of alarms blew up in my head. I knew where it was going. Well, as we all know, the French eventually installed him as president of Côte d'Ivoire. Savi Alhassan Ouattara is now running a 3rd term. Is there a coup worse than that? But Alhassan Ouattara is the one making the most noise about Niger. Africa needs to rethink how it acts in the interest of the African people. I'm currently writing a book that suggests that the conduct of African leaders today, if they are not careful, will mean 1,000 years of servitude for the black man. And we want to avoid that. Now, back in those days, they were quasi-authoritarian regimes. I'm not a supporter of authoritarian regimes. However, if you take the utilitarian view of the state, and you find that a bunch of criminals, I've written a book that talks about the criminal hijack of politics in Nigeria. And the full title is Why Not? Citizenship, State Capture, Creeping Fascism, and the Criminal Hijack of Politics in Nigeria. If you take what is going on in many West African countries in the name of democracy, by God, I would rather that a group of soldiers are shooting at each other every day to see who will eventually. Look, let me even give you an example that I personally feel very strongly about. The way our National Assembly is carrying on. Can you reform that institution when they are the ones who will make the decisions on reform? You get to a point where the only way to do this thing is to press a reset button. I've never liked military rule. Military rule is particularly problematic because they are built on what I call negative legitimacy and the delegitimating of the previous order. No, look, you see, the concept of legitimacy says that nobody, whether he has all the guns in the world trained on people, can actually have power if he doesn't get some kind of acceptance, or they don't get some kind of acceptance from the people. And the way military regimes got their acceptance was to say in their coup broadcast, the hospitals have become consulting clinics, and people say, that's true, self. And then they get that legitimating attribute, and that allows them to govern. Many civilian regimes who actually convert the vote into an alternative gun to rob the people put themselves in a position where they're... Look, how many people are killed in the coups that take place in Nigeria? More are killed at elections. So if the dignity of the human person is the ultimate value, and more people get killed to get somebody to call himself elected, isn't it a lesser moral burden that maybe nobody is killed and some people, back in those days in the 60s, the way the Latin Americans sorted that out, they didn't even go and shoot at night or do anything. They just said, look, General so-and-so, 6 divisions are loyal to him. You, General that, how many divisions do you have loyal to you? 2. My friend handed the presidential search to him. Are those the ideal forms? Democracy is a work in progress. But we cannot pretend that because the West says go to elections, that is a better form of deciding how you govern for the common good of all in the interest of the people.
We'll just take this last person and that's all, please.
Very often, we do not do enough to act on what we believe in. I'm sure many of you have seen a video that has gone viral, and I think it's a remarkable thing that is out. A professor who enters a classroom and says to some young lady, get out of my class. And she looks everybody and she leaves. And then he asks the class, what just happened? What was it? They agreed it was not just. What did she do? He said, but none of you did anything. The unfortunate thing is that ultimately somebody or everybody does something. But usually it is when it is too late. When I talk about fascism, and thank goodness I wrote this book before today, because I predicted 2023 4 years ago. Go and read the book. I talked about fascism and how it grows. You use bullying to win an election. You gain power through bullying. The next time you are further encouraged to bully. Go and look at Hitler's ascendance in the Weimar Republic in Germany. And the powerful, important statement credited to Reverend Martin Niemöller. So first, they came for the communists, and I said, I'm not a communist. Then they came for the Jews. Those Jews, they make wahala, Jerry. Then they came for the Catholics. I'm not going through the whole, I said, thank God I'm an Anglican. Finally, when they came for me, there was no one left to speak up. Now, the naked truth of the matter is that 25 years ago, an American called Robert Kaplan predicted the path we are traveling in the book, The Coming Anarchy. In looking at cleavages that are forming in West Africa, ethnic, religious, and so on and so forth, economic, and went as far as predicting that West Africa's descent into anarchy could start from a convergence of these cleavages in a city in Nigeria called Jos. I wrote about it. I shouted about it. I even formed an NGO called NUTRA, Nigerians United to Resist Anarchy. And we began to buy books to send to policymakers that points to these things. What has happened? Everything is predicted has happened. So people will act sometimes more rationally like my group in Nutra, sometimes ultimately by violently engaging the system. And that's when we all descend into anarchy. God forbid that that be the path we travel.